The sun burned low over Seoul's skyline, painting the world in molten gold. Up on Hannam Hill, the homes weren't homes. They were kingdoms, glass and marble fortresses guarded by gates taller than dreams. And at one of those gates, Cathy Lucas stood, lost, sweating, and seconds from collapse. Her phone battery had died an hour ago. Her suitcase had broken 10 minutes after that. The address scribbled on the crumpled paper in her palm had led her up this winding road, far from the crowded part of the city, until even the air smelled expensive. She wiped her forehead, forcing a smile. "Okay, Cathy," she muttered to herself. "You didn't fly halfway across the world to faint like some tragic movie extra. You got this." But her body disagreed. Her legs trembled, her throat burned, and her stomach, empty since morning, growled in betrayal. She blinked hard. Her vision wavered. "Excuse me," she tried to call out as a sleek black car rolled up the hill. But the words dissolved into silence as her knees gave out. The world tilted sideways. Her small purse slipped open as she fell, and the last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the blurred outline of a man stepping out of that car. Tall, composed, and breathtakingly calm, walking toward her with quiet authority. Inside the car, Dr. Jin-Soon Park barely reacted when the driver braked. His world was built on precision, not emotion. "Sir," the driver said, alarmed. "The woman, she just—" Before he could finish, Jin-Soon was already kneeling beside the fallen stranger, his fingers on her pulse, his movements efficient and confident. "Still breathing," he said softly. "Probably heat exhaustion, dehydration." From her small open purse, a Navy passport peeked out. Cathy Lucas, Detroit, Michigan, a foreigner, alone. He glanced up the hill toward his private villa, pristine against the skyline, and made a rare, impulsive decision. "Take her inside," he ordered. The driver hesitated. "Sir, your privacy." "Do as I said." The car rolled through the iron gates of the Park estate, leaving behind a trail of silence and curiosity, because Jin-Soon Park never stopped for anyone. When Cathy woke, the room smelled faintly of jasmine and something sterile. For a moment, she thought she was in heaven, until she noticed the massive chandelier and the sleek, minimalist furniture that screamed money. Then the door opened, and the man who stepped in didn't look like any doctor she'd ever known. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his black hair perfectly combed, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms and an expensive silver watch. His face was unreadable, the kind that looked carved rather than born, his jaw sharp enough to wound. "You're awake," he said in flawless English, his voice deep and calm. Cathy blinked. "Where am I?" "My villa." He set a glass of water on the nightstand. "You fainted outside the gate. You're fine now." "Oh." She sat up, mortified. "Did I fall in front of your house?" "Yes." "Oh my God." Her face flushed. That's so embarrassing." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "It's human." Cathy frowned, unsure if that was kindness or judgment. "Well, thanks for saving me, Dr. Park." Jin-Soon Park. Her jaw dropped a little. "As in the Dr. Park? Seoul General's chief surgeon? The one who performed the heart transplant on the minister's daughter?" He said nothing, but the faint tightening around his mouth was enough. "Wow," she muttered, shaking her head. "Of course. I had to pass out in front of the most famous doctor in Korea. My luck is ridiculous." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, but he didn't smile. "You should rest. The driver will take you home once you're stable." "I don't exactly have a home yet," she said before thinking. "I just arrived today." He paused, faint surprise breaking through his composed mask. "You came to Seoul alone?" "Yep, with dreams, debt, and the wrong shoes." That almost earned a smirk. Almost. He turned to leave. "Get some sleep, Miss Lucas." "Wait," she called softly. "Thank you for not leaving me on the street." He didn't look back, but his voice softened. "I wouldn't have." And then he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt strangely full. Cathy stared at the closed door, her heart doing things it shouldn't. He's intense, she whispered to herself, and probably never laughs. But she couldn't shake the memory of the way he'd looked at her. Not with pity, not even curiosity, but with something harder to name. Something that felt dangerously close to interest. The next morning, the sunlight danced across the villa's high ceilings. Cathy sat at the dining table, feeling completely out of place among the polished silverware and the quiet servants who moved like ghosts. One of them, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Seo, smiled gently. "Dr. Park said you should eat before you leave." Cathy blinked. "He said that?" "Yes, he never keeps guests, you know. Not even family." "Good to know I'm breaking records," Cathy said with a nervous laugh, poking at the plate of pancakes. Mrs. Seo's smile widened faintly. "You're the first person he's brought home in years." Before Cathy could respond, the soft click of footsteps silenced the air. Dr. Park entered, dressed in a tailored navy suit, every movement precise. He glanced at her plate. "You should eat properly. You'll need your strength." "For what?" "To survive, Seoul," he replied dryly. Cathy snorted before she could stop herself. "You make it sound like a battlefield." "It is." He said it so calmly that she laughed again. "You really don't do jokes, do you?" He looked at her, really looked this time, and something shifted in the air. "Not often." "Well, maybe you should try," she teased. "It might even make people less scared of you." His brow lifted slightly, and then, just for a heartbeat, the corners of his lips curved upward. A smile. Real, fleeting, and worth everything. Cathy froze. "Oh wow, you can actually smile. I was starting to think your face was allergic to emotion." He almost laughed. "Almost. Eat your breakfast, Miss Lucas." "Yes, doctor," she said, rolling her eyes playfully. As he turned to leave, she called softly, "Hey, Dr. Park?" He stopped, his profile sharp against the morning light. "Thank you again," she said sincerely. "You didn't have to help me." His voice was quiet. "Maybe I didn't have to, but I wanted to." And then he walked out, leaving Cathy's heart fluttering like a secret she wasn't ready to name. The villa looked calm from the outside, white stone walls, trimmed hedges, sunlight spilling over glass, but inside, it felt like a cathedral built for silence. Every sound seemed to echo. Every movement seemed measured. Cathy could feel it as she wandered through the wide hall after breakfast, her suitcase trailing behind her. She didn't mean to snoop. She was just looking for the driver. At least that's what she told herself. The place was immaculate, not a thing out of place. Framed photographs of hospital wings, charity awards, and architectural sketches lined the walls. But what struck her most was what wasn't there. No family pictures, no laughter, no life. She muttered under her breath. "Does this man even own a couch with cushions?" "You're in my private wing." Cathy jumped. Dr. Jin-Soon Park stood at the end of the hallway, jacket off, sleeves rolled, his gaze sharp enough to stop her mid-breath. "Oh, I was just, looking for the exit," she stammered. "This house has more doors than a mystery novel." He said nothing for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, "Rule number 1. No one enters this wing." She swallowed. "Sorry, I didn't know there were rules." "There are always rules," he said simply, stepping closer. "Rules keep order." Cathy tilted her head, nervous but curious. "You sound like someone who doesn't trust chaos." "I'm a surgeon," he replied. "Chaos kills people." Something in his tone made her soften. "And order keeps you safe, right?" He looked at her, really looked, as if she had just asked the one question no one ever dared. His jaw tightened. "Yes." For a moment, the air hung thick between them. Then his voice gentled. "You should rest before you go. Mrs. Seo will show you to the guest room." But before she could answer, a distant thud broke the quiet. Jin-Soon's head snapped toward the sound, the faint crack of porcelain. They both turned the corner just in time to see a maid bowing frantically beside a broken vase. "I'm sorry, Dr. Park. It slipped." His face remained calm, but his voice was cold. "Be careful next time." Cathy frowned as the maid scurried off. That was just an accident. You didn't have to sound like an ice cube. He looked at her in faint disbelief. Excuse me? You heard me. Not everyone can be perfect like you. His eyes narrowed, but instead of anger, something else flickered there. Surprise. Maybe even intrigue. No one has ever spoken to me that way, he said finally. Cathy shrugged. Then you've been hanging out with the wrong people. A silence stretched between them. But this time it wasn't cold. It was alive. Her courage startled him. Her honesty disarmed him. And before he could stop himself, he said the words that would change everything. Stay for a few days. Until you recover. Cathy blinked. Wait, what? He turned away before she could read his expression. Mrs. Seo will prepare the room. Don't wander into my wing again. When he disappeared down the corridor, Cathy whispered to herself, half amused, half dazed, Stay. In this palace? With him. Her heart thumped faster than she wanted to admit. And somewhere deep inside the house, behind those marble walls, Jin-Soon found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. Looking back over his shoulder. Just once. Just long enough to see her smile. Wasn't supposed to accept. By the third day at the villa, Cathy had learned 3 things about Dr. Jin-Soon Park. 1. He hated noise. 2. He loved black coffee, nothing else. And 3. He didn't talk unless absolutely necessary. Which was fine. Except that she couldn't stop noticing him. He moved through his house like a ghost of discipline. Calm, measured, always composed. Even his silences had a rhythm. And yet, something about him felt lonely. Mrs. Seo, the villa's kind housekeeper, told her he was hosting a medical foundation gala that evening. Doctors, investors, government officials, everyone important will be there, she said, carefully folding napkins. He never takes guests, not even family. Cathy smiled. Then I guess I'll stay out of sight. But fate, as usual, had other plans. That evening, as Jin-Soon stood in his room adjusting his tie, his driver entered with a hesitant knock. Sir, the catering service called. There's been a mix-up. The backup host is asking for assistance. Jin-Soon sighed. Send Mrs. Seo. She's already gone to the hospital wing, sir. A pause. Then the faintest knock on his open door. Cathy stood there. In a simple blue dress, her curls gathered loosely. She looked far too lovely for someone who hadn't planned on being seen. Your driver said you needed help, she said softly. For a second, Jin-Soon forgot what air felt like. You don't have to, he began. Relax, doctor, she teased. I won't faint this time. He almost smiled. Almost. And somehow, 30 minutes later, Cathy found herself standing beside him as guests flooded the grand marble hall. Doctors in tailored suits, women glittering in designer gowns, cameras flashing. It was like stepping into another world. Jin-Soon's expression didn't change, but Cathy noticed how people whispered around him, eyes following his every move. The untouchable doctor, one woman murmured. He doesn't date, doesn't even look at anyone. Until that moment when he looked at Cathy. She felt it, the weight of his gaze, protective, intense. Something unspoken passing between them. When a young heiress named Su-min approached with a practiced smile, brushing her manicured hand against Jin-Soon's arm, Cathy turned away awkwardly. But Jin-Soon's voice cut through the chatter, low and controlled. Excuse me, Miss Su-min, I'm with someone. Cathy froze. With? He met her eyes. You're helping me tonight, remember? Her breath caught. Oh, right. But she wasn't imagining the faint curl of a smile on his lips. As the night went on, Cathy found herself laughing quietly at his dry humor, whispering small jokes between toasts, her presence softening the sharp edges of his world. For the first time in years, Jin-Soon didn't feel the weight of expectation, just the strange lightness that came from being near her. Later, when the guests began to leave, he escorted her to the garden balcony. Quiet, moonlit, the city lights glittering below. You handled tonight well, he said finally. She laughed. You make it sound like surgery. In my world, they're not so different, he replied. Then, more quietly, "Thank you for being here." The softness in his tone startled her. "You're welcome," she whispered. For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people from different worlds, bound by something neither of them could name. Then Jin-Soon turned away, his voice faintly hoarse. "Good night, Miss Lucas." But when she smiled up at him and said, "Good night, Dr. Park," it was the first time he realized her voice had started to feel like home. The next morning, the villa was quiet again, too quiet. Cathy woke to sunlight spilling across the silk curtains and the faint hum of soul beyond the gates. She meant to thank Jin-Soon for letting her stay, for the dinner, for everything, but the man had already disappeared, as if the gala had been a dream. "Dr. Park left early," Mrs. Seo told her, pouring warm tea. "He always does after events. Sometimes he goes 2-3 days without rest." "Working that much can't be healthy," Cathy said softly. Mrs. Seo smiled sadly. "He's not running from work, dear. He's running from memories." At that same moment, far across the city, Jin-Soon stood in the glass corridor of Daehan Medical Tower, his reflection sharp against the skyline. The hospital was his kingdom, 12 floors of innovation, precision, and rules. Yet to him it was also a fortress. Inside, his assistant briefed him on patient schedules, donor lists, press calls. But his mind wasn't there. It hadn't been for years. Every time he walked past the pediatric ward, he remembered her. Minnie. The little girl who'd been his first failure. She'd been only 6, bright, sweet, endlessly talkative. Her parents had brought her to him for a simple surgery. Everything had gone perfectly until the post-op infection. It wasn't his fault, everyone said. But that didn't matter. He had promised her she'd go home to see her dog. She never did. And after that, Jin-Soon stopped making promises to anyone. The tabloids had called him the cold miracle doctor, praising his brilliance, his focus, his perfection. They never knew he operated like a machine because feelings hurt too much. He had sworn never to let emotion interfere again, until Cathy Lucas fainted at his gate and smiled at him like he wasn't a machine at all. That evening, when he returned to the villa, he found Cathy outside, sitting near the cherry blossoms that lined the courtyard. Her shoes off, her eyes closed as the petals brushed her hair. She looked peaceful, and entirely out of place in his world of sharp edges and sterile rooms. He didn't mean to speak, but the words came quietly. "You shouldn't sit here. The ground's cold." Cathy looked up, smiling. "Dr. Park, I'm fine. Besides, I like it here. It feels alive." "Alive?" he repeated, almost tasting the word. "Yeah," she said, hugging her knees. "Where I'm from, things move too fast. Everyone's chasing something: money, status, likes. Here it's just air and flowers." Her words were simple, but something in them touched the part of him that had forgotten how to breathe. He studied her quietly. "You came all this way from Detroit. Why?" Cathy hesitated, then smiled faintly. "To prove I could. My mom used to say I lived too small, so I promised myself I'd see the world. But I guess Soul decided to see me first." He almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she added softly, "And maybe I came to find something real, even if it's just for a moment." Her honesty disarmed him. He wasn't used to people speaking to him like that, without agenda, without flattery. "Miss Lucas," he said quietly. "The world rarely gives without taking something first." Cathy met his gaze. "Maybe that's true, doctor, but you can't heal if you never let anyone touch the wound." He froze. For the first time in years, someone had seen past the armor. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, but charged, electric. The cherry blossoms rustled above them like a soft applause. Then Jin-Soon turned away, his voice low. "You talk too much." Cathy grinned. "That's what everyone says." But he didn't see her smile fade as he walked away, because behind his cool words, there was something new in his tone. Something that didn't sound like rejection. It sounded like fear. Fear of how much he was beginning to feel. It started with a sound. A sharp crash echoed from the kitchen. Jin-Soon looked up from his study, the faintest frown cutting through his calm expression. The villa was usually silent, every movement measured. But this was chaos. He followed the noise and stopped at the doorway. There was Cathy, standing in the middle of a sea of broken porcelain, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. A bowl of soup dripped down the counter like golden rivers of guilt. "I swear I just wanted to reheat it," she said quickly. The microwave made a noise. I panicked, and he raised a brow. "And you declared war on my kitchen?" she groaned. "Okay, I deserve that." For a moment, he simply stared at her. The Billionaire Doctor in his perfectly pressed shirt, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp as glass. And then, to her utter shock, his lips curved. Just barely. But it was a smile. "Mrs. Seo will have my head," he murmured, stepping inside. "Guess I'll take the blame," Cathy offered. "You can just say it was a foreign cooking accident." "I think the term is disaster," he said dryly, kneeling to pick up the shards. She knelt too, their hands brushing over a piece at the same time. And that's when it happened, that flicker of stillness, like time had forgotten to move. Her skin against his was warm, trembling. He looked up. So did she. For a man known as Seoul's coldest doctor, Jin-Soon had never been so aware of someone's closeness. The scent of vanilla from her hair, the way her eyes, deep, soft, uncertain, seemed to draw him in without permission. "You'll cut yourself," he said, voice suddenly rough. "I've handled worse," she whispered. Their hands lingered, just a second too long, before he withdrew sharply and stood. "Go sit," he ordered quietly. "I'll clean this." Cathy exhaled, half nervous, half amused. "You don't like people touching your things, do you?" He didn't answer, but the faint color in his neck said enough. Later that evening, rain swept over Seoul, fine and misty, painting the villa windows silver. Cathy sat by the glass, watching droplets race each other down the pane. She felt strange, restless, drawn to a man who spoke in silences more than words. And then thunder. The power flickered, then went out. Her phone flashlight was dim, and her heart leapt as the entire house fell into darkness. "Dr. Park?" she called. "Mrs. Seo?" No answer. She took a tentative step, then another, until her foot caught on the rug. She stumbled forward, straight into a solid chest. Strong hands caught her waist instantly. "It's me," Jin-Soon said, his voice low. "Oh my God. I'm sorry." "Don't move," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "You'll fall again." The faint light from the emergency lamp carved his face in shadows. Sharp cheekbones, storm-gray eyes, lips that looked too soft for someone who carried so much control. "Are you afraid of the dark?" he asked quietly. "Only when I'm alone," she said. He hesitated, then did something that shocked even himself. He reached for her hand. "Then you're not alone." For the first time in years, he didn't overthink. Didn't calculate, he just let himself feel. The warmth of her fingers, the tremor in his pulse, the way something inside him unclenched. They stayed like that until the power returned, the villa glowing again. But neither of them moved right away. When Cathy finally pulled back, she whispered, "You know, for someone who doesn't smile much, you're pretty good at saving damsels in distress." He looked at her, really looked at her, and said quietly, "Maybe you're the one saving me." That night, neither of them slept well. Jin-Soon lay awake, hearing her laughter echo faintly in the hall. For the first time since Minnie, someone had gotten through his silence. And it scared him more than any surgery ever had. The next morning dawned clear and golden, but the warmth in Jin-Soon's villa was short-lived. Cathy woke to the smell of coffee and the faint hum of voices downstairs. She slipped out of the guest room, her hair loosely tied, wearing one of Mrs. Seo's spare sweaters. She thought she'd just say good morning and maybe thank Jin-Soon again for everything. But the moment she reached the staircase, she froze. A woman stood in the living room, elegant, commanding, and coldly beautiful. Her pearl earrings caught the light like small, perfect knives. Madame Park. Jin-Soon's mother, and she was staring straight at Cathy. The air thickened instantly. "Who is she?" Madame Park's tone could have cut glass. Jin-Soon looked up from his seat at the table, his expression unreadable. A guest. Guest? She repeated, her gaze raking over Cathy's simple clothes, her bare face. In this house. Cathy's pulse stumbled. She bowed quickly. Good morning, ma'am. I didn't ask for your introduction, Madame Park interrupted, her voice sharp but deceptively calm. I asked my son a question. Jin-Soon stood, his jaw tightening. Mother, you're being disrespectful. I'm being protective. She shot back, eyes flashing. Do you know what people already whisper about you? The cold doctor who refuses every woman of worth. And now you're hiding this. Cathy's face burned. She tried to step back quietly, but Jin-Soon's hand shot out. Steady, protective, stopping her. Enough, he said. You don't get to speak about her like that. Madame Park blinked, stunned. Her son, the one who had never raised his voice to her, was defending someone. And not just anyone. A woman who didn't belong to their world. Jin-Soon, she said slowly, the warning in her tone unmistakable. Do not throw away your future over a passing. Don't finish that sentence, he said quietly, cutting her off. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mrs. Seo looked away, pretending to busy herself with the teapot. Finally, Madame Park's voice softened, but her eyes stayed icy. I came back from Busan because your father told me you've been avoiding your engagement meetings again. And now I see why. He didn't reply. Her gaze shifted back to Cathy, and her smile was polite, painfully so. My dear, I'm sure you're a good girl, but my son has responsibilities that reach far beyond charity cases. Cathy's breath hitched. She wanted to disappear, to scream, to say she wasn't some pity project. But before she could speak, Jin-Soon stepped between them. Please leave, mother, he said softly but firmly. Madame Park's face hardened. You'll regret this rebellion. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking like thunder on marble. When the door shut, Cathy exhaled shakily. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered. He looked at her. You think I'll just stand there and let her insult you? She's your mother, Cathy said softly. I don't want to be the reason you fight. He walked closer, his voice low. You're not the reason. You're the truth she doesn't want to see. Their eyes met, his fierce, hers vulnerable, and for a moment, words failed them both. But deep inside, Cathy knew the cost of his defiance. The tabloids had already called her a scandal once. If his mother joined that fire, she could destroy everything. That evening, Madame Park sat in her limousine, staring out at the glittering skyline of Seoul. Her assistant leaned forward. Ma'am, should we proceed with the board meeting next week? She smiled thinly. Yes, and make sure Dr. Park's name stays spotless. The assistant hesitated. And the girl? Madame Park's eyes narrowed. Find out everything about her. This setting lets us keep the elegance, warmth, and tension between their worlds, while making every encounter layered with unspoken emotion, longing, and fate. The bell above the door chimed softly. Welcome to Bloom Atelier, the manager said with a bright smile, handing Cathy a small apron embroidered with golden threads. You'll do fine here. Just handle deliveries carefully. Our clients are particular. Cathy smiled faintly, tying the apron around her waist. The scent of roses, lilies, and peonies filled the shop, wrapping around her like gentle armor. After the chaos of the last few weeks, the quiet rhythm of arranging flowers felt healing. She needed peace, not pity. Her mother was stable in the recovery wing of Park Medical, and Cathy wanted to prove that she could stand on her own. So she worked hard. Days blurred into evenings filled with color. Ivory roses for a hotel gala, violet orchids for a wedding, and sometimes small forget-me-not bouquets that she crafted for herself when the ache became too sharp. But fate wasn't finished crossing their paths. One Friday morning, the manager called out, Cathy, we have an urgent delivery, Park Villa, Songbukdong. They want the new orchid collection for tonight's dinner event. Cathy froze mid-motion, the stem she was holding slipping from her hand. Park Villa, his home. She forced a smile. I can do it. Her heart thudded all the way there. The villa's tall gates came into view, just as familiar as the night she fainted. Except this time, she was conscious, clutching a box of pale pink orchids instead of her pounding chest. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the van. The guard recognized her instantly but said nothing, only gesturing for her to wait near the side path. Then footsteps. Measured, calm, and unmistakably his. Jin-Soon emerged from the main door in a dark charcoal suit. Sleeves rolled slightly as if he'd been working from home. His expression faltered for half a second when he saw her, then softened. "Cathy," he said quietly. She forced herself to stay professional. "Delivery for Madame Park. I work with Bloom Atelier now." His lips twitched. "You handle every job like it's saving the world, don't you?" She looked away. "It's just flowers." "Nothing about you is just anything," he murmured. The words hit deeper than she expected. She handed him the arrangement, careful not to let their fingers brush, though her heartbeat betrayed her. But when she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Wait." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You shouldn't have to start over like this. Let me help." "Don't." Her tone cracked. "I'm not your responsibility, Jin-Soon." His jaw tightened. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she asked softly, her eyes meeting his. "Because the last time I checked, your mother thinks I'm a stain on your name." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I don't care what she thinks. I care what you think." Her pulse skipped, and just when she was about to reply, Mrs. Han's voice floated from the balcony above. "Dr. Park, is that the new arrangement?" They both froze. "Yes, Mother," he called back smoothly, taking the box from her hands. Madame Park's sharp eyes swept over Cathy, but she said nothing. Not a word, just a knowing, dangerous smile. Cathy forced a polite bow before retreating, her heart in her throat. That night, as she sat by her apartment window, arranging the leftover petals she'd taken home, she whispered, "Why does he make everything harder?" Across the city, Jin-Soon stared at the same orchids now sitting in his study. His mother's order. His mind nowhere near medicine or business. He had saved hundreds of lives. But this loving her felt like the first time he was risking his own. The invitation came wrapped in cream silk paper, with gold-embossed letters that shimmered when they caught the light. Cathy found it waiting for her at the flower shop counter. The manager beamed. "You've been personally requested to assist with floral placement for an exclusive event at Park Villa." Madame Park herself made the call. Cathy's heart skipped. Madame Park, Jin-Soon's mother. The same woman whose cold smile had sliced through her like glass. She almost said no, but curiosity, and something deeper, defiant, made her whisper, "I'll do it." That evening, the villa looked like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows on the marble floors, and Seoul's most powerful people glided through the halls in gowns and tuxedos. Cathy arrived early, dressed simply in black slacks and a white blouse, her hair tied neatly back. She carried boxes of fresh orchids and peonies, pretending her hands didn't tremble. The other decorators whispered as she passed. The foreign girl who dared to stand in a billionaire's house again. She ignored them and kept working. Each flower she placed was her armor, soft, silent rebellion against judgment. Half an hour before the guests arrived, Mrs. Han descended the staircase like a queen. Every pearl on her gown caught the light. Every glance was deliberate. "Miss Lucas," she said smoothly, "you did well last time. My son speaks of you often." Cathy forced a polite smile. "Thank you, ma'am."
Find out what happens in their relationship in the next episode, which is coming up soon, by clicking on the notification icon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also tell us the country you are watching us from in the comments section so that we will make a story for you.